Money, money, money. Most news is about money. These people say what they're told. They're not going to talk back to the people that are giving them the $1 million paychecks. They toe the line, they smile, they laugh, and they tell you bullshit. So let's look at the top 10 highest earning news anchors. These people wear $10,000 suits. You think they care about you? They smile, they lie, and they're just all part of the descent into nothingness that all civilization is going into. Money, money, money. News is out there if you look for it. This is a show called The Ring of Fire. It's an excellent show, and all radiation is not from Fukushima. This one site in California, there's probably tens or hundreds of them around the nation that have been abandoned, and as long as the company made money and left, that's all that matters, because the EPA is not going to do anything. No government agencies give a shit. Everybody's just out to make money. Everything's so corrupt. But there is the news out there if you look for it. So this is the Ring of Fire for a little bit.
That's why it's a lot worse, doesn't it? It does. And it also goes to show that at this point in the United States, we're really living in a bad science fiction movie. Yeah. Because you had scientists that have been warning for decades, that this happened, it was contaminated. Meanwhile, the government, the regulatory capture that we have out there in the state of California, which is supposed to be this liberal bastion of hope, yeah. California, yeah. It is
our last great bastion of liberal hope right. is California, and that's where all these governmental agencies are owned. They are owned and operated by corporations, just like they all. Let me give a shout out to this Duffield care.
So, California, the liberal bastion, they elected Nancy Pelosi again, who said you will never get health care. So everything's so corrupt, people think they're voting for people who are for them, but the people are against them because they watch CNN and MSNBC and all that crap.
But now we've got this report about the fact that the Santa Susana Field Laboratory decades ago got contaminated with nuclear site and other toxic chemicals. It's now been burned, put into the atmosphere, put into the air, and is potentially poisoning millions of people in California.
You know, it's ugly on so many levels, But what really should infuriate people that are in even 100-mile radius of Santa Susana Field is that for about 20 years you've had environmental advocates that say you need to clean up the radioactive problem in this field. You need to clean up the toxic fuel problems in this field because both of those things are hugely dangerous to the population. So you have had.
So this is a great show. Link below. The reason the fire releases the radioactivity is because the radioactivity is in the ground. So if it doesn't go to the groundwater, then it's in the water. It gets sucked up by trees, get incorporated into all the plants, all the vegetation. Then when it burns, all the radioactivity burns. So radioactivity, and this is a California deal, and these people, they're worried about California. But radiation is a worldwide problem, and it's just an indication that the closer it is to you, the more you worry about it, but it doesn't matter where you are. It's going to get you worldwide. So I'm going to show another reliable news source. It's called TYT, and this one is 12 minutes long, so I'll leave the address for it. But the thing is, when news networks talk about this, they give it about 14 seconds or 30 seconds, and then they say, let's move on to the new car. So listening to things for more than 2 minutes is a basic thing about understanding any news story. You can't listen to 15-second sound bites. It's just propaganda. So this is TYT talking about another nuclear problem. There are hundreds or thousands of these plants or these waste spots in the United States, let alone worldwide. And a lot of this stuff was dumped in there in the 60s. So they probably opened up the truck and tipped the bed and dumped the shit in there. That was the 1960s. So now it's all underground and waiting to burn. It, fires don't only happen above ground, they happen below ground.
Hey, it's Jordan with TYT Politics. This is not some mad science experiment. We have masks on because we are right outside of the Bridgeton landfill, Bridgeton, Missouri, pretty close to St. Louis. And what you're seeing right now is green tarp, a green tarp all the way around where nuclear hazardous waste is underground, underneath that green tarp. What makes this site pretty dangerous is there's an underground chemical fire very close to the nuclear material, and nobody knows how close. Let me tell you a little bit about it. Landfill fires are pretty common, but this one is different. It's only about 1,000 feet away from nearly 9,000 tons of nuclear waste, and there's really no barrier between them. So you have nuclear waste from the Manhattan Project days that was put in here in the early 60s, and there are 9,000 tons. And it's not clear where all the nuclear waste is.
So it's just another ongoing disaster of silliness. And the mask he's wearing, that's a dust mask, remember, and it's not going to do anything to protect you from any kind of radiation. I can't find a picture here. So a half face mask with the two filters on it will protect you a little bit if you got the right filters, and then if you have a full face mask on, it will protect you 10 times better than the half face. And this paper thing is just for show because it will protect you 0% from any radiation. But there are news stories out there. That's what I'm trying to show. Not CBS, not NBC, not MSNBC. If they have this program on, they'll talk about it for 12 seconds and move on to sell a car. Another great, truthful news reporter, Thom Hartmann. Leave the link below. This, I'll let him talk for 1 minute. This is, again, about a 12-minute program. You can't get news in 30-second sound bites from CBS or any of these business propaganda organizations. So we can get news if you look for it until the internet shut down, which I suspect to happen at some point, but we'll see. Could be wrong. So this talks about when you think of life, you got to go from, I don't know, the amoeba, the sperm on up, bacteria, fungi, whatever, but it all works its way up to the top of the food predator where we are. So if everything dies below us, what are you going to eat? Dirt? No. And so the only reason I do this is to prepare people for what's coming, because I figure the more you know, it's just better. Instead of waking up one day and say, oh, there's no food in the store, shit, because that's what's going to happen. So I'm just trying to get people a little more aware of the bullshit that's on out there. So Thom Hartmann's good to listen to. Let's listen to him for 1 minute.
In Britain, there's some really good studies, bees, moths, butterflies, and beetles. 30 to 60% of species were found to have diminished ranges. People who studied fish found that fish had fewer mayflies to eat. Ornithologists kept finding that birds that rely on insects for food were in trouble. 8 of 10 partridges gone from French farmlands. 50 and 80% drops respectively for nightingales and turtle doves. These are birds that eat insects. Half of all farmland birds in Europe disappeared in just 3 decades. The birds might simply be starving. In Denmark, rollers, little eels, little owls, Eurasian hobbies, and bee eaters, these are all birds that live on insects, larger insects like beetles and dragonflies. They have abruptly disappeared. They're gone. Then came the German study. The numbers were stark, indicating a vast impoverishment of an entire insect universe, even in protected areas where insects ought to be under less stress. The speed and scale of the drop were shocking even to entomologists who were already anxious about bees or fireflies or the cleanliness of windshields.
And the cleanliness of windshields is an interesting one. I used to drive across country, and I'd go 30 miles in the Sacramento Valley, and I'd have to clean off the window. There's really no bugs anymore. So last week I showed a little thing on birds near Fukushima. So that study was like it's only going to happen here near Fukushima, but it's happening all over the world. So as the lower species all get eliminated, the higher ones on the food chain will not have anything to eat. This is with Mark. So here's Thom Hartmann with the scientist, and you remember they always say there's 0 deaths from Fukushima. I'm stealing this from Mark Man. I'll leave the link below.
Study you co-authored that suggests as many as 14,000 Americans have died as the result of Fukushima?
Well, my colleague Joe Mangano and I used only governmental data, that is by the U.S. government's EPA and CDC, and by comparing the deaths before Fukushima for 14 weeks and after Fukushima, and then expanding on the data, we found that there has been an increase in deaths in the United States. This has been corroborated by findings of deaths, particularly of children younger than 1 year in British Columbia.
Which is one of the first places where the radiation would hit. So you say younger than 1 year. Is it that, in fact, I thought that the death rate for children that age had actually been declining in the United States until the Fukushima reactor.
Correct.
It had been. And
So that's pretty good evidence that there are deaths from Fukushima, considering the babies younger than 1 are dying at a faster rate shortly after the disaster. Thom Hartmann actually made a few businesses himself and sold them and made lots of money, and now he's a news guy, not like Mr. Trump. So there is some good news out there. Okay, this wasn't good news, but there's valid news out there. And one of the best news sources for nuclear is Beautiful Girl by Dana. He is on generally every weeknight at 1800 or 6 p.m. West Coast time, and he just talks about the continuing lies from all these supposed experts who are just paid to lie, and that's why they lie, is because they're paid to lie. Money, money, money.